Have you ever caught yourself scrolling through your feed, passing a tragic news story, a natural disaster, or a heartbreaking charity ad, and you just felt absolutely nothing?
As we give more, we often feel less connected to the act itself. Why does generosity sometimes leave us empty?
You're not a bad person. You're experiencing what researchers are calling the Philanthropy Paradox. We live in an era of unprecedented charitable generosity. Global philanthropy has reached historic levels, with wealthy nations and individuals channeling billions toward causes ranging from poverty alleviation to disease eradication. In 2024 alone, U.S. charitable giving reached a staggering $592.50 billion. But beneath these massive numbers lies a really uncomfortable truth. Donors increasingly report feeling completely disconnected from their giving. People are uncertain whether their contributions are actually solving the problems they want to fix. Today, we are going to unpack why we are giving more money than ever before, yet feeling less connected to our giving. We'll explore the psychological toll of the digital age, the systemic glitches in the nonprofit world, and how we can fundamentally reimagine what it means to give. Part 1. The illusion of the big numbers. Let's start with the empirical reality of where our money is going. The top-line numbers look fantastic. U.S. charitable giving hit $592.50 billion in 2024, which is a 6.3% increase in nominal dollars. Foundation giving rose by 2.4% to $109.81 billion. And corporate giving jumped significantly by 9.1%, reaching $44.40 billion. But if we look a little closer, the cracks start to show. When you adjust that 6.3% increase for inflation, the real growth is only 3.3%. This means the actual impact growth is far more modest than those flashy headline figures suggest. And what about everyday people? Since 2023, average donations have increased by about $2 annually, which is roughly a 2% year-over-year growth. This tells us that the growth in total giving is actually coming from volume, more donors throwing in a few bucks, rather than depth. We are also seeing massive shifts in who and what we fund. Giving to religious organizations actually experienced a decline of 1% in 2024. This marks a major departure from historical trends, suggesting people are shifting their priorities towards secular causes. And here is where it gets dangerous. Many causes have become hyper-dependent on a very concentrated donor base. For example, in 2025, just 29 participating intermediary funders accounted for more than half, 54%, of grants for LGBTI communities. So the money is there, but it's fragile. And more importantly, the feeling behind the money is disappearing. Part 2. The empathy erosion. Let's talk about your brain on the internet. There is a reason you feel exhausted. It is called compassion fatigue, a state of emotional exhaustion resulting from prolonged engagement with suffering. Usually associated with healthcare workers, today public compassion fatigue is a defining feature of our modern consciousness. Our psyche evolved where awareness of suffering was limited geographically and temporally. You knew about your immediate village. This limited flow gave your brain time to process emotions, respond, and return to equilibrium. Contemporary digital systems have inverted this. A crisis in East Africa becomes visible within hours through satellite imagery. A pandemic or natural disaster unfolds in real time right on our screens, flooding our senses. This flood creates psychological numbing, where exposure to large-scale suffering actually decreases our emotional response. We respond less to statistics about thousands dying than when shown the story of a single individual. Faced with overwhelming numbers, our moral intuitions simply fail. We cannot comprehend the difference between 1,000 and 1,000,000. Platforms are designed to make this worse. The 24/7 news cycle, amplified by algorithms, has eliminated our rhythm. Algorithms amplify intense content because platforms profit from engagement, and negative intensity drives it. They optimize for fear and anger. We are hyper-aware of global suffering, yet increasingly emotionally unavailable to respond. The result? We feel overwhelmed, we feel guilty, and we are just exhausted. Charities know this. They use the identifiable victim effect. We respond stronger to concrete suffering than to statistics. But here is the catch. When thousands of nonprofits scale this strategy, it backfires. Proliferation desensitizes us. Each compelling story becomes diluted by the knowledge that countless others remain untold. Worse, focusing on a single photo obscures systemic causes. It hides the policies and power structures that create the problem. Donating gives us the emotional resolution of having helped, but it often stops there. It psychologically substitutes for demanding actual structural change. We need to look deeper. Part 3: The Systemic Glitches. So, we are emotionally drained, but when we muster the energy to give, where does the money actually go? Welcome to the nonprofit industrial complex. There are over 1.5 million registered nonprofits in the United States alone. While they do essential work, the massive scale of this sector has created some severe systemic inefficiencies. Let's talk about the biggest myth in charity, the overhead myth. Donors are told to give to charities with low overhead, spending little on administration or salaries, but this metric is deeply flawed. An organization that underpays its staff and has terrible infrastructure might look good on paper, but it delivers poor quality services. Conversely, robust infrastructure and professional staff might have higher overhead, but achieve vastly greater impact. Even Charity Navigator realizes that overhead is necessary for effectiveness. Yet, this mythology persists, forcing charities to starve themselves. Then, there is the fragmentation problem. Thousands of organizations compete instead of working together. Imagine 5 different organizations in one community addressing homelessness separately, competing for the exact same donors. Instead of coordinating to fix root causes, like policy failures, they operate separately. Resources are scattered, and solutions are lost. And how do they compete? Marketing. The most funding often goes to those with the best PR, not the greatest impact. This leads to performative philanthropy, giving primarily for public relations or social status rather than genuine assistance. Corporate philanthropy does this constantly, funding climate research for PR while simultaneously lobbying against climate policy. Tech companies fund coding programs for PR while using tax strategies that drain the very public services they claim to support. Performative philanthropy privileges visibility over impact. It forces communities to serve a donor's PR needs, eroding authentic giving. Part 4: The Giving Smarter Revolution. Okay, so the system is flawed. The good news? A revolution is already happening. People are trying to be smarter. One major movement is effective altruism. This applies rigorous quantitative data to ask one simple question: which interventions produce the greatest good per unit of resource invested? Effective altruism focuses on 4 core principles. Tractability. Can the problem actually be solved? Scale. How many people are affected? Evidence. Does empirical data prove this intervention works? And neglectedness. Are there funding gaps that others are ignoring? This approach has been incredibly successful at directing resources toward massive global health issues, like malaria prevention and vaccination programs. It proves that some causes simply produce more goods per dollar than others. But it is not perfect. Effective altruism suffers from quantification bias. Measurable outcomes aren't the only things that matter. Social justice, human dignity, and systemic change are vital, but you can't easily put them on a spreadsheet. It also suffers from context blindness. An outsider looking at a spreadsheet might prioritize a community's needs completely differently. At its worst, it risks replicating colonial dynamics, where wealthy outsiders dictate solutions rather than supporting the affected communities. This is why there is a massive push toward community-led initiatives and hyperlocal giving. Communities themselves usually have the most nuanced understanding of local problems and culturally appropriate solutions. We are seeing new models emerge: participatory grant-making, asset-based community development, and community wealth building. These models restore agency, dignity, and self-determination to communities. The path forward demands a fundamental shift. We have to move from traditional charity to investing in systemic change. If inadequate wages cause poverty, a food bank helps the symptom, but it doesn't fix the wages. If a lack of affordable housing causes homelessness, a shelter helps, but it doesn't change housing policy. Investing in systemic change means funding policy reform, supporting institutional change, and building power among marginalized communities. To overcome the philanthropy paradox, we must redefine giving altogether. Money is not the only way to give. You can give your time and professional skills, like legal, medical, or technical advising, which can be far more impactful. You can use your platform for advocacy or engage in community care, like mutual aid networks with your neighbors. Sometimes, just showing up, listening, and bearing witness to injustice has profound intrinsic value. To fix our empathy burnout, we need to choose deep focus over broad awareness. Stop trying to absorb the pain of the entire globe. Instead, develop a deep, multi-year commitment to specific causes. Build direct relationships and demand transparency. The philanthropy paradox proves that we are giving more while feeling less. The question is whether we are willing to reimagine giving entirely. Not as a transaction, but as a relationship. Not as a PR performance, but as authentic engagement with justice. The future isn't funneling more dollars into broken systems. It's fundamentally restructuring how power and resources are distributed. When we do that, our empathy will be restored through real, deep connection to the communities creating lasting change. What is one local cause you care about, and how can you give your time this month? Let me know in the comments below. If this video changed your perspective, please hit like and subscribe for more deep dives. Thanks for watching.